Thank you. And thank you, Quiet Lightning, for having all of us here today. I'm excited to be a part of the readers today, and I am a Black queer fantasy writer. Thank you. And this is a story I wrote called Commandments. Red stared at the commandments written on the walls. They were the ones his father wrote with black ink over white walls that were impossible to wash away. After his father passed, he left Red a small fortune, and it all came in the form of this house. The same house he'd grown up in the middle of nowhere. The same house that his father had written his commandments on. On the walls, the ceilings, the floors, the doors, and every crack and crevice in between. "What did your father write these words with?" Stan asked, as he poured some nail polish remover on a paper towel and began scrubbing, a last-ditch effort. "Your guess is as good as mine," Red sighed out. "Can you pass me the acetone?" It was the dead of night, but no sleep would come to the couple. There was an electricity in the air that had enough voltage to wake the dead. Stan passed him the acetone, continuing to scrub. "You weren't kidding when you said your dad was a very disciplined man, were you?" Stan said incredulously. Red could tell because he kicked an eyebrow in the air. But his father's discipline had always been so. Red remembered the first commandment his father wrote on when he was younger, maybe around the age of 13. Commandment 1, listen. It felt arrogant to Red, cold, unforgiving, and Red did everything he could to look away. He wasn't so concerned with guidance from his father. He was more concerned with being seen, which his father never seemed to be able to do, especially after he came out. Now, with his father gone and the house belonging to him, Red felt further and further away. "Welcome to my life before I moved out and never looked back," Red apologized in his way. Stan was the first man he'd ever brought to his father's home, but since they were engaged, it felt right for Stan to see all of him. That was why he invited him over to help get his father's words off of the wall. "No luck with the nail polish remover?" Stan asked, his dark skin glistening in light sweat. He wrapped his big arms around Red, who just wanted to melt. Nothing was working. He dropped the nail polish on the counter. "None," Red answered. "Forgive me for asking, but did you ever ask your father why he wrote these words on the wall?" "All the time." Red broke open a bottle of wine. It was the next night, and they still had no luck with removing the words. But they decided to spend the night again. They didn't live too far away, so the trip back and forth wasn't so bad. And every time I asked him, he always said some nonsense. "Well, what did he say?" "That he was a god, and that I needed to learn the rules." Red shrugged his shoulders, and Stan looked at him. A blank stare in his eyes, a palpable shift in energy. Then he bent his eyebrows. "I'm sorry, babe." Stan hugged him closer. "That's not a lot to go off of." The next night, Red came to the house alone, a bucket of white paint in one hand and a glare in his gray eyes. After Stan's bent eyebrows, Red surmised he'd had enough. And so had he. He'd had enough of his father's words. Words that never sought to understand him, but only sought to be understood. And now, standing in front of his father's house again, he felt the divide between them deepen, and Red was hoping for a set of wings, something that could fly him out. All the scrubbing they'd been doing for the last 2 nights was for nothing, but he would try to erase those words in pure white. He looked around the house, trying to think where to start. So, he took himself to the first one, out of the 95 his father wrote. Listen. The commandment screamed at him noiselessly. Red couldn't just listen. at least not without being seen first, and he wondered if it was too late to be seen by anybody. He dipped his paintbrush, watched as it dripped, and slathered it over the words. There, Red said to himself. The paint worked. Somehow he was surprised, and to celebrate he opened the bottle of wine he never finished with Stan and poured himself a glass, thinking to his father's reasoning for these words, that they were God's, that these were his father's commandments. It had never made him curious before, but now he wondered if there was ever some truth to be made of those words, or if it was all just a terrible attempt at getting close to him. A knock came at the door, a demanding pound. Stan? Red asked, a glass of wine still in his hand, the pounding coming harder. Okay, I'm coming. Red came to the door, and when he opened it, he dropped his glass of wine, for the man at the door looked identical to his father. Same arch of the nose, same inky black skin, same serious look in the eyes. The resemblance was uncanny. Red caught himself staring, gathered himself. Can I help you? But the man returned his question with a smile. So, the God of truth really did have a son, the man said, which he was not really truthful about. Red raised his upper lip. You must have the wrong house. Red smiled politely, then turned to close the door. Let me tell you something, nephew, the guy called to him. The reality of things is set in here, and you ain't never gonna get them words off your old man's walls. They're meant for you. Did somebody set you up to say that to me? Red tried not to erupt. Some neighbor who doesn't want me moving in? Did a real estate company send you? I'm Mr. Reality, your divine uncle, and your father's twin, the man who looked identical to his father said. I'm here because I sensed a strong power, and it felt like my brother's. Well, he's not here, but his words are. Red had never seen this man in his life, but if he claimed to be his godly uncle, then maybe he knew something about these words. Red gestured for Mr. Reality to come see the words, the same ones that were driving him mad. Let me tell you something else, nephew. That white paint ain't gonna work. Mr. Reality eyed the paint can, but Red just wanted to burst into tears. He ran to the bathroom door where the first commandment was written, and the words had outright bled through the white paint, almost as if he hadn't painted anything at all. Wow, this many commandments, Mr. Reality said, taking a look around. That's unusual. Well, he must have really hoped you would see. See what? What his world was like as the former God of truth. Former, Red asked. Yes, former. That power has now passed on to you. Excuse me? Red asked, dipping the brush back into the can, desperately trying to wipe the words away. Then he stopped as something caught his eye. Commandment 5, I will never leave you, which had always seemed like a promise more than a rule, and Red guessed he hadn't. He could feel his father's essence in the house they shared, and inside of him, something new, but something familiar. His uncle had even come by to witness him, to see, and he had let him in because anyone who knew anything about why his father wrote these words on the wall had to be important to him. Red could feel it. The commandment glowed a bright golden color before burning away. Red's face became screwed up as he felt hotness inside of him. But I don't understand. Why did it burn away? Your father's essence, the essence of a God, is now inside of you, nephew. And once you understand his truth, it will burn into you. And then, well, you're going to have to write your own. Stan, Red called to him. It was the next day. The sun shone bright, shooting through the clouds. Can you pass me the pink paint? Red had thrown on some blue jean overalls that he didn't mind getting paint all over, which was a good thing because there was a lot to write. But meeting his uncle for the first time felt like a breath of fresh air, even if he couldn't explain why. Red guessed it just felt good to be seen. And he wanted Stan over to see every part of him too. So, in big pink letters, Red wrote his own commandment on the wall, Commandment 1. Love is the strongest force alive. Thank you.